Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm excited to have Soraya Lane joining me today. Hi Soraya.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you for having me.
And just wanted to mention that Soraya is one of our associated authors, so we're excited to have her as that as well in the group. Just a little bit about Soraya. Soraya graduated with a law degree before realizing that law wasn't the career for her and that her future was in writing. She is the author of historical and contemporary women's fiction, and her novels Wives of War and The Last Correspondent are Amazon charts bestsellers. Soraya lives in a small farm in her native New Zealand with her husband and their two young sons and a collection of four-legged friends. When she's not writing, she loves to be outside playing, make believe with her children, or snuggling up inside reading. And her latest book is The Italian Daughter, which actually is, I can't remember what month, but I know it's one of our monthly reads coming up.
Oh, that's
Um,
exciting.
yeah, so April, I just had a look. It's our April monthly read. So,
Wonderful.
yeah, really excited about that and to talk to you about The Italian Daughter.
Yeah.
Just wanted to say I started reading it last night. I'm about halfway through
Oh, did
and
you?
really, really loving it. It's great. And I
Oh,
think
that's
it's
so
going to be a
great.
series, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes. So
So
it's
that's
actually part of a
exciting.
planned eight-book series.
Oh,
So
eight.
I've got a
Wow.
lot of writing ahead of
Yeah.
me.
Do you want to start off by telling people a bit about The Italian Daughter?
Yes, yes. So as I said, it's part of the first book in what's planned to be an eight-book series. So I had an idea. I'd actually been sort of thinking about this idea for quite a long time, but we had very strict COVID lockdowns in New Zealand, and I had a lot
Mm.
of time to think and be at home pondering on it with ideas. And so I just sort of wanted to write a big sort of series that might appeal to fans of Lucinda Riley's Seven Sisters series. I felt there was, it was so wonderful with that series being able to pick up any book in the series and enjoy it without
Mm.
having to have read the previous ones, which is how I found the series. So this first book it introduces us to a place called Hope's House, which was in the past a home for unmarried mothers and to have babies safely, find adoptive parents, and I guess just have a safe place, which was not always easy, a few generations ago. And so we have Hope's niece who finds these little boxes that have been left behind, and there is a name on each box, and basically they relate to each main character in the series. It will be their grandmother. So we have Lily in this book, who is a winemaker. Her favorite place in the world is Italy, and she happens to be going there anyway. And she discovers this box that's been left behind by what we presume is the birth mother of her grandma. And so no one even knew Lily's grandma was adopted. And it sends her on this beautiful journey in Italy, looking for her grandmother's past, trying to figure out where her grandmother came from, and trying to sort of piece these clues together. And the clues are an old recipe, the handwritten recipe, on a piece of paper, and also part of a program which ends up being from the La Scala Theatre, which is very famous in Italy. And so you've sort of got this interwoven dual timelines where we've got Lily having this what turns out to be a rather beautiful romance in Italy in modern day as she searches for the answers to these clues.
Mm.
And we also go back in time to 1940s Italy, and we meet Estee and her sort of more tragic love story, and her life as a ballerina, and how she ties into the whole story. So
Mm.
yeah, it
Mm.
was very waffly and long. I'm sorry.
No, that was a great description of it all. And yeah, and when you said it was going to be eight books, then I suddenly clicked for me that that's the eight boxes as well.
Yes, yes. And look,
Mm.
I've signed on with my publisher for four books, and
Mm.
but there is definitely I've planned out all eight stories in the series. So I'm hoping that the eighth and final book will be sort of Hope's story and how she links into it. Because obviously she's a
Oh,
very
yeah.
central character, but
Yeah.
also not on the page necessarily,
Mm.
because it was her who encouraged these birth mothers to leave the clues behind.
Mm. No,
Yeah.
that would be great to hear about her as well. Yeah. And can you share a bit with us? Like you did mention Lucinda Riley, but what gave you the idea, and maybe the idea of the boxes and that, what gave you that idea?
Yeah, look, I think I'd been thinking about this series for such a long time. I also write historical World War II fiction
Mm,
for Amazon Publishing, and I'd sort of been thinking, that I love writing historical fiction, and World War II is so special to me. But they are quite often a bit darker and very emotional stories to
mm,
write. And I previously used to write a romance earlier in my career, so I just had this real passion to sort of write something that was a little bit more that I could, I guess, discover a contemporary story that was more lighthearted, and then also have the sort of, interwoven with a historical story as well. So the dual timelines. But
mm,
with the little boxes, I was just trying to think, what could tie these stories together? Something that, that would make them all feel a little bit familiar if you had read the whole series, but also you could just pick up any book in the series without having to have read something before. So I just suddenly thought how gorgeous it would be to find these dusty little boxes, with a name tag on them, and that had been tucked beneath floorboards and forgotten about, and just uncovering those clues. So it was just a
mm.
tool, I guess, to have clues and have them hidden somewhere.
Yeah. And are you just concentrating on writing these, or are you still writing your other war novels as well?
Yeah, no, I'm doing both. So
Yeah.
I've got a lot on my plate. I don't quite know what I was thinking, but no, I'm writing this series. I mean, I've thought about writing a series for so long, and maybe
Mm,
3 or 4 books. I have no idea how it exploded into something this big. But no, I'm very much writing my historical World War II books as
at
well.
the
So I'll
same,
have one of
yeah.
those coming out every year too.
Okay. So you plan to have one of these books out every year?
Yes, so I had actually already, because I started writing during our COVID lockdowns, I was sort of
Mm,
ahead of myself by the time I sold the series. So the second book in this Lost Daughters series is The Cuban Daughter. Some of you may have seen it. I'm mentioning it as The Sugar King's Daughter, but they are actually, we've just had a change of title. So that's going to be The Cuban Daughter, and that comes out in March actually. So the
okay.
first two are
So
coming out
quite,
quite quickly,
yeah, quite
and then we'll
quick.
sort of be yeah, spread out after that.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. Oh, how exciting. Um,
Yeah.
I've got quite a few people watching, so just
Oh,
wanted to
great.
remind people watching, if you do have any questions for Soraya, please type them in comments and I can read them out. Kelly said she's excited to see a book set in Italy.
Yeah.
There's hardly any, she thinks, that are set in this country. And is it hard to plan out and write a series that doesn't give away the previous book's storyline?
Yeah, I think so I agree. Italy is a fantastic setting. And I think
Mm,
when I was writing this, like many of us, I was dreaming of travel and thinking, when our
mm,
borders open up and we can travel and go to these delicious places. So I think Italy was perfect for that. But no, in terms of planning out the series, it is hard. I think the biggest thing for me was writing standalone stories that were linked together. So,
mm,
in that way, it's not necessarily hard not to give away what happened in a previous story simply because they are very much standalone. So, we have, a granddaughter and her story, and then, her grandmother's backstory. And then the next book will be, an entirely different granddaughter who has nothing to do with the previous one.
mm,
But they do have that beautiful connection. There'll be a shared scene in every book where they have gone to the solicitor's office, into the lawyer's office, to find out that something has been left behind for
mm,
their grandmother who has passed away. So I think you've just got that lovely little link there. But no, it wasn't too hard to hide what's happened in each story as I've been writing.
yeah.
But trying to figure out a way to link them all was the hardest part when I was planning
Mm,
it.
mm. And
Yeah.
did you get to visit any of these places?
No, well, certainly not recently. It's been a
Mm,
very long, 2.5 years here in New Zealand. I'm
mm,
sure most of you feel that way in Australia as well.
mm.
But I've got plans to visit a lot of these lovely countries. The second book is set in Cuba, so I would just do anything to travel there and have a look around.
Yeah, yeah. So a different country for each book?
Yes, yes. So we've got Italy and then Cuba, and then I think the third book. Oh, I'm just trying to think where the third one goes. We have one in France. We have, we go to Switzerland. There's sort of, a lovely movement all around. So
Mm,
it's nice sort of exploring those different countries.
mm. And I liked how the Italian daughter has sort of a little bit of a hint of New Zealand in it.
Yes, I know. I had to
Mm,
have the New Zealand, the main character, Lily, as I mentioned, she was a winemaker, and I do have her having just returned from New Zealand, because we
mm,
obviously have a fantastic, our vineyards here are wonderful and we produce great wine. So it was nice to mention a little Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand in the
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was great. And Wendy says, wow, 8 books in a series sounds good. With your plans already in place, you must be very organized.
Yeah, do you know, I was actually talking to an author friend the other day and just saying I used to be what we call a pantser. So right by the seat of my
Mm,
pants, no planning, just
mm,
sit down at the laptop and write. And in more recent years, I've become a very serious plotter. And so it's one of my editors really forced me into that. And so it's interesting because I feel like it's helped me to grow as an author, really focusing on that plot and planning out and putting that time in before I start writing. So I think the last few years of changing my process really helped planning this series.
yeah. And do you have a different publisher for each of your different books?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
So my publisher for my historical World War II fiction is Amazon Publishing in the
Mm.
UK, and then the series is with Bookouture. But the reason I actually even considered having a different publisher is my editor at Bookouture was the editorial director at Amazon UK
Oh, so you
we had
already had a
crossed over there
relation.
for a few years.
Yeah.
So I really felt
Mm,
safe in safe hands moving to
mm,
someone that I already had a relationship with.
mm.
Yeah.
And do you find that difficult though, having different pressures from different publishers?
Yeah, so I've had to very carefully plan out my deadlines and my
Yeah.
publishing dates as well. But previously, I had always written, even up to 3 publishers at a time. So I have had that juggle before. I swore I would never do it again, but here I
Mm,
am. But I think, they're both very different types of stories. And
yeah.
although I think they appeal to a crossover audience, and many of my World War II readers have seemed to have enjoyed The Italian Daughter over the last few
Mm,
days,
mm,
it's just nice writing, two different stories,
yeah. Yeah.
slightly different genres. Yeah.
Yeah, and your world, one thing when I first discovered you is like a New Zealand author who seems very, very popular in the US. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that has been lovely seeing that audience grow there. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that something that surprised you or?
I think, my agent is in the US, and
Mm,
I started out writing romance that was very much US focused. I sort of saw that as the biggest market at the time. What I have noticed though is that my market share I've got a lot more readers in the UK now. And
okay.
I do think, my publisher is based in London, but I've got that lovely balance of having my editor in the US and, having she's helping push me in that market. I think the books have just, when I first wrote them, I didn't realize those World War II books would really appeal so much to the US audience, but
Mm,
they
mm,
just seemed to take off there at the time. My
mm,
first one came out in 2013, I think it was. So it has been really nice just seeing the audience grow in both the US and the UK. What is harder is that a lot of New Zealand readers are only just discovering my books, and it's interesting. A lot of them, I think, Australia and New Zealand readers have really come on board with reading Kindle books and
yeah.
ebooks in general in the last
Mm,
2 years, and suddenly people are saying to me, oh, I was reading a book and your latest book popped up on my Kindle as my next
mm,
read, and so that's been really interesting, actually meeting people in real life that read my books. Yeah.
yeah. And what have you been able to do to promote the Italian Daughter? Have you been able to do anything in person?
Look, nothing in person at this stage, but
Mm,
I do have exciting news for New Zealand and Australian readers that we're actually having the paperback edition come out on the 10th of January. So for those of you that aren't Kindle readers, you will, and you are in Australia and New Zealand, it's the first time I've had a book being widely published
mm,
for the down under market. So it
mm,
will be really nice. It'll be in all the bookstores, airports, pretty much everywhere throughout the market. So there's a lot of in-person events being planned, and that will be so wonderful for me to actually connect with local, and I mean local being Australia as well.
yeah,
I
you'll
feel
have to
very
let
much at
us
home in
know.
Australia.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to let us know what your plans are so that we can
Yes,
come and see you.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely, and it will be wonderful. So I'm really
yeah,
looking forward to that paperback release.
yeah, no, that's great to hear. And Kelly wonders if you've got a favorite author in this genre.
Oh, that's a very good question. In this genre, well, I mean, look, I love Lucinda Riley.
Mm,
She's someone I've always really admired as an author. I've been having a real glut of reading World War II fiction lately. So all the authors in my head, I've just read Heather Morris's
oh, yes.
amazing series set in
Yeah.
Auschwitz. I'm just reading Three Daughters at the moment. But in terms of this particular genre, I never say her name right, but Santa Montefiore is fantastic. She's sort of UK author in this genre. Oh gosh, my mind is suddenly going
Mm.
blank. All I can think of are the books I've just finished reading.
Do you want to share with us what you've been reading lately that you would
Yeah,
recommend
so
to us?
I have read the whole Heather Morris series. So
Yeah, that's a great.
that one's pretty. It took
Mm,
me a long time to read this. I
mm,
think I felt like it was going to be the Tattooist of Auschwitz was going to be just too sad for me. And I
mm,
actually just found it. I found it really beautifully written, and that
mm,
it really carefully balanced that sadness with that sort of human emotion. And so I've just devoured the three books in that series, and I've also just finally read The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna.
oh,
I've
yes.
been
Yeah.
terrified of reading it because I
Mm,
think there's sometimes a lot of pressure with a really popular book in a similar genre or the same genre that an author writes in. So I'm actually about halfway through that at the moment and really
mm,
loving it. Yeah.
mm. And Wendy's got a good question. Well, first she said that Italy is of interest to her too, but
Mhm.
she wonders with your historical books, where did your interest in this genre come from?
Yeah, look, I read, well, first of all, I'm the granddaughter of war veterans. So I very much grew up, with that whole Australia, New Zealand, our Anzac Day, seeing my
Mm,
granddad with the little poppies, which we wear for Remembrance Day, obviously in Australia and New Zealand. And just, I've always sort of had that in my mind that my grandfather on my father's side, he actually fought in World War One, and then my granddad on my mum's side was in World War Two, and the stories of so many uncles who, passed away during the war.
mm,
So I think I've always had a compassion and interest for that period in time. And then the more I started reading about World War Two, I just had this overwhelming desire not to let those stories be lost. And
mm,
at the time, there wasn't a lot being written from the female perspective about World War Two. There's certainly a lot now, which is fantastic. But back sort of 2011 to 2014, there wasn't a huge amount being published. So I just wanted to give a voice, I suppose, to those women who had, done incredible things, whether they were pilots or, driving trucks, or war journalists, all those types of women. So,
mm.
and I wrote the first book in the series, and my first World War II novel was Voyage of the Heart, which is about British war brides coming over to America. And I wrote that book, and it ended up being my bestseller. And I just felt really passionate about the genre, and my readers seemed to love it. So it just sort of
Mm,
spiraled from there.
mm.
Yeah.
And what was your journey to publication like?
Yeah, so it feels like a long time ago. I've been
Mm,
published just over 12 years now, so it's
mm.
been fantastic. But I started out, so I was at law school. I graduated with law, but every spare moment I was writing, and that's sort of been something I've done my whole life. So instead of going into law, I actually ended up becoming a journalist, and I was pretty much working as a freelance journalist during the day and writing books at night. So it took about 7 years of full time, writing, not full time, but writing sort of pretty much every night. And I finished 7 manuscripts, and it was my seventh manuscript that
Oh,
sold.
really?
So I feel like it was a really
Mm,
solid apprenticeship. I always say to aspiring authors, if you have a manuscript that doesn't sell, or you feel like you've been writing for so long and you haven't sold your first book or had success, you've really got to think of it as an apprenticeship. I mean, I went to law school for 4 years to study to be a lawyer.
mm,
And so I feel like it's the same with writing. The more
mm,
you write, the more you develop your voice and become stronger and figure out what you really should be writing, or what really makes you feel like it's the book of your heart. So
mm,
so it felt like a very long time. Back then we had to mail off samples of our writing, and it cost a
mm,
fortune to send
mm.
from New Zealand to New York or London. But it felt like a long journey, but now it's flown past. So
Yeah, yeah. And I'm
yeah.
interested to know, has your book's been translated into any other languages?
Yes, so I have had various languages with my World War II novels, but the Italian Daughter, in fact, the whole Lost Daughters series we've already signed agreements for 11 foreign
Oh,
translations. So
really?
I'm
That's
not quite sure
exciting.
what's happened with this book, but
Yeah.
it's a lot of the European markets have loved it. So we had an
Mm,
auction for the German rights a couple of months ago. We also just had an auction for the Finnish rights. So it's going into everything for sort of Italian, French, German,
mm.
all the markets, even Dutch and Polish. It's
Oh,
been
really?
amazing.
That's,
Yeah,
yeah,
so they're
that's
all coming out
amazing.
next year. Yeah,
No, that's great.
yeah.
And do you think you'll be able to get out to any of those places when they?
I hope so. I'm hoping the first book sells really well, so they want to
Yeah,
send me on a tour
yeah,
overseas. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And Callie says, out of all of your books, what one has been the favourite to write?
Oh, the favorite. That's I always feel like the favorite book is the one that I'm writing at the
Mm,
moment. But I feel like The Italian Daughter really stands out to me as one of my favorites, simply because I felt like I was writing it at a very difficult time. I
mm,
mean, we were very privileged here. We've got a large property with our horses and lots of space for our children to run around. So being in lockdown during COVID wasn't as hard for us as it was for so many other people. But it was still hard knowing you couldn't go anywhere or do anything. And so this was a real escapism for me. So I think this is probably one of my favorites. I also really loved one of my historical novels, The Secrets We Left Behind. And that was set in Dunkirk during World War II. And
mm.
when I watched the movie Dunkirk, which I know many of you will have watched, the World War II film, I loved it, but I finished it and turned to my husband and said, I don't think there was one woman in that whole movie.
Mm,
Like, it was just all
yeah.
men. And so I immediately started researching whether there were women at Dunkirk, what they went through, were they left behind, were they there? And so I really feel quite strongly about that. That was one of my favorites because it felt like I was uncovering something that hadn't been told
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
have any of your books been optioned
For film,
yeah, or film
yeah,
or
no,
TV?
actually,
Yeah.
my children's series I wrote many years ago was optioned,
Mm,
and then that fell through. And then I've had two options on my historical books that haven't happened. But
mm.
I have just signed with an amazing film agent for this Lost Daughters series,
Oh, really?
specifically the Italian Daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
and so it's the agent who actually brokered the Bridgerton deal with
mm,
Netflix. So I've got everything crossed that might turn into
mm.
something, but it's so hard. You just don't know.
Yeah.
Whether it might or not, but fingers crossed.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Wendy wonders if you have a favourite character in your books.
Oh, favorite character. Do you know, I feel like, yeah, a bit like with the book I'm writing at the time, I always have a favorite who I'm writing.
Mm,
If you're familiar with my World War II novels, many of you will know that I normally have three women as the main characters, and I try and make them very different and distinct characters, just because it makes the writing and hopefully the reading more enjoyable. And so normally I always have one standout character when I have those three women, it's normally sort of it's often the person that I feel starts out maybe a little bit shyer or not as confident, and really develops throughout the story. So I can normally pick a favorite from the book I'm writing, but I
mm.
don't know whether I have a particular favorite. Actually, maybe my novel, The Last Correspondent. There is a very plucky war correspondent in that book, and I think maybe she might be one of my favorites. She famously smuggles herself on a boat to see the Normans, to see the landings, and during World War II. So she's very plucky, and I do love
Yeah.
her.
Yeah. And you must have done a lot of research into World War Two. Do you
Yes.
have a real woman who you admired from that time, your favorite one that you had?
Yeah, look, I feel like I have someone different every time I'm writing on a novel, because I really
Mm,
dive quite deeply into, um, you know, women who did something amazing, at that time, specifically what I'm working on. So at the moment, the book I'm writing is tentatively titled The Secret Midwife, and
mm,
it's set in Auschwitz during World War II. Part of it's set there, a lot of it's set away from the camp. And I have based that on, there's a couple of midwives and also a gynecologist, all women, who delivered many babies during, at the concentration camp.
mm,
And so I very much, very, very full of admiration for them and what they went through. They even performed many terminations of pregnancies just to stop them, because
mm,
they knew these women would be killed if they were
mm,
discovered as being pregnant.
mm.
And when I look at how many babies they delivered, one midwife famously delivered 3,000 babies,
Oh,
and
really?
one of the women died in childbirth,
Oh,
despite
wow.
what she had at her disposal to help them.
Mm,
So I just feel like at the moment they're who I'm focusing on and who I feel passionate about. But at the same time, it'll be someone else with the next book I'm researching.
mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about when you've been doing your research, what have you found that has most surprised you?
I think I'm surprised with particularly with my World War II novels, with
Mm,
every novel that I research, I discover something that I just seems like it's fiction because it's so
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, like I've got my book, The London Girls, coming out in November. And I discovered these women who were riding motorcycles in London, you know, while London was being bombed, to deliver these, you know, highly important war memos. And you just think, you know, I think, how have I researched World War II for so many
Mm.
years and
And
never
not.
heard about these
Yeah.
women?
Mm.
And you just think, you know, they were doing the most dangerous job. It's just fascinating. So I feel like I'm surprised just every, you know, every time I'm sitting down to research.
Mm.
And with the Italian daughter, it was, you know, even just discovering what happened to the La Scala Theatre during the war, and how they rebuilt that and started performing there again.
Mm.
So yeah, I think there's, with every book, I always find something amazing.
Mm. And do you find it common that when you're doing your research for one book, you find something that you think, oh, this will be great for another book?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I've got a whole notebook, and then, you know, when with my contracts with Amazon, I always have normally contract for 3 books. And then when I've finished writing those 3 books, I sit down and go through my notebook and normally have so many ideas as starting points for where I'm going to research and what my next books could be about. So I
Mm.
feel like you research one book and, you know, 3 more ideas come out of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's just so much great stuff out there.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what if you could be one of the characters in any time at all, who would you choose and
Ooh,
why?
that's really tricky. Do you know, I think I would be one of the war correspondents in World
Yeah.
War II. I think
Mm.
that would be absolutely fascinating. I wouldn't like having to fight for my right to be there amongst the male correspondents,
Mm.
but I think that would be pretty incredible. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. And could you tell us a bit more about what you're working on now? You mentioned
Yeah.
the Secret Midwives. Is that the one you're
That-
working on or the one
yes.
that's out? Yeah.
Yeah, no, The Secret Midwife is going to be my 2023 historical release. So that's what I'm writing at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm sort of, and I've just recently handed in the second book in my Lost Daughters series, so The Cuban Daughter. So I'm eagerly waiting to
Mm.
hear what my editor thinks of that book.
Mm.
But no, I seem to have, I'm either writing, editing, or proofreading something, a different project at the moment. But yeah, I think the second book, The Cuban Daughter in the Lost Daughters series, which I've not long finished, that was great to write. So I've
Yeah.
just finished that. It was really beautiful going to sort of, you know, in my research, going to pre-revolution Cuba, and just how opulent and incredible it was. Just a real different time. And then also
Mm.
researching Cuba, and just seeing how it's just been stuck in such a time warp. And you know, often these mansions that are crumbling now were just the epitome of luxury and
Mm.
extravagance. You know, mid 1950s. Yeah.
Mm. And how do you find writing about a place that you're not able to actually go to?
Yeah, I think I've been writing about World War II for so long, and
Mm.
obviously that's all research based, and I've got a good imagination, so
Mm.
I'm doing, you know, I do a huge amount of research, and I hope that I'm as accurate as possible. One of the best things for me was actually when The Italian Daughter, when an Italian publisher picked up the rights to The Italian Daughter, because they said they just loved it, and I thought, phew, I've obviously got that one right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you want to share any reader feedback that might have touched you or surprised you?
Yeah, do you know, I think the nicest thing for me, for my World War II fiction, the loveliest thing is when someone says, I've never read war fiction before, I've never read about World War
Mm.
II, and, you know, I just can't believe, you know, what these women were doing, and thank you so
Mm.
much for opening my eyes to that. So that's always really special. I actually just had a review on Goodreads for The Italian Daughter, and it said something along the lines of, you know, I never read romance and I don't like dual timelines, but I absolutely love this book and it's one of my favorites this year. And I thought that's actually really special, because it's someone who perhaps didn't
Who
expect
would
to
have?
like it,
Yeah.
as opposed to one of my readers who already know that, you know, they like my voice and they love my
Mm.
stories. So
Mm.
I think it's always nice to have an unexpected reader fall in love with a book.
Yeah, yeah, that must be great. Well, thanks so much for talking to me. It's been great chatting to you, and I hope everyone
Okay,
goes out and gets The Italian Daughter. As I said, it's our April book club read, and I
great.
hope I can talk to you about coming to talk to us when we have the discussion in April.
Yes, please do, please do. And also, I think I'm going to have the cover reveal tonight, hopefully. for the second book in the series, The Cuban Daughter. So I'll make sure to share it.
Yeah,
in the
that would be great if you could, because have you got the Italian Daughter cover there to show us?
No, I
Oh, you
haven't. You know,
haven't.
the paperbacks haven't arrived. I'm devastated. All these people have got them in America and everywhere. I
Yeah,
haven't got a
and you
copy,
have,
so I don't have it
because
here.
that's a
No.
beautiful cover, that one.
It is really pretty. It's so nice. But no, it feels very strange doing all the promotion and not having a book. It's very odd. And it was actually sent from Australia, and I noticed the postage was horrific. So, you know, we paid that much for it, you think it would get here quickly.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, and thanks to everyone who joined in with questions.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye.